All right, I think we have some people online. We're ready to go, maybe. I didn't get to talk to all of you, but we have to use this microphone for the online people. And we have to repeat questions in the room so the online people can hear. Those are the rules. All right, tonight we have a great panel, a mixture of zone and state workers here to talk through a couple of different topics, answer questions in the room. Look at this great full house. This is always, we did this last year and it was really helpful, really useful. So I think it's a win. We're doing it again. There's some changes that came through late 2022. I don't know about you, but I'm probably still confused or haven't done anything right with all those changes. So we can get some clarification around that. There's some questions you guys submitted. Are we okay on? Okay, there's some questions you guys submitted. We'll get those answered. If you have questions, raise your hand throughout. Just overall though, you guys were partners in this. We're doing this together. So we'll be kind and respectful all the way around the room in everything that we're doing and asking tonight. And just remember the confidentiality aspect of asking questions to take out some of those details that you maybe shouldn't share. So I'll put that reminder out there for tonight. Okay, so you know what? I'm gonna pass the microphone down so you guys can introduce yourselves. You'll do a better job than I will tonight.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Kelsey Bless. I am the licensing unit administrator, and I've been with the department over 13 years, primarily writing law, rule, and policy as it relates to foster care and the licensing standards. So when the unit went live last April, I took that challenge on and sort of shifted roles into that. Would love to hear from you. We are continually adjusting some of the ways of doing business and offering additional efficiencies. So both Rachel and Becca work in our unit along with Bob, who's here tonight as well. So very pleased, and I'll turn it over to Brittany to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Fode. I'm the licensing and level of care administrator for Children and Family Services. And so what that really means is I oversee respite and shelter, but I also oversee licensing of facility and agencies to place children who are in North Dakota foster care.
Hi, I'm Tracy Mertz. I'm with Three Rivers Human Service Zone. I'm the lead worker with case management for foster care and in-home. I've been there for a little over 7 years, but was in Burleigh County 14 years prior to that. So been around a while.
Peggy Netzer. I'm with Burleigh County Zone. I've been in the foster care unit since January of 2020, and last week transitioned from foster care worker to foster care supervisor. So, congratulations. Those are all my people.
I'm going to let you guys jump right into some of the topics you prepare. I can definitely queue it up, but we have a couple of topics. Reimbursements. Look at you guys. Yeah, maybe just you're in the headlights.
Okay, I can ask some. Are you prepared for some stuff? Okay, then we'll go into questions. Look at you. You've got your computer.
Okay, so, there were some questions just about reimbursement to foster care providers, the timeliness of that, how it works, and I'm going to just quickly paint a picture about Children and Family Services. So about 2.5 years ago, we did a redesign project, and the eligibility staff who used to be in the zones transitioned to CFS. So we took on 18 positions at that time, and all those eligibility workers located all over North Dakota who determined the eligibility of a child who enters care, which really means nothing to all of you, but it means a lot to us. And the reason it means a lot is how we drive and draw down federal and state money to help reimburse for the cares of the children in your homes. And so those individuals are working now as CFS employees, and it has streamlined the process to get reimbursed. And we continue to kind of grow through how to get information routed to the appropriate people and through the appropriate people. So with Tracy and Peggy being here from the zones, the case management needs to be approving those expenditures that are happening in your home. So if you need clothing allowance, or the child wants basketball shoes because they're going to be doing YMCA basketball and they don't have any tennis shoes, there's irregular payments that can be authorized for that. Legislative session just wrapped up, And we were approved for a 3%, up to a 3% increase for providers in 2023, and then also again in 2024. And so just know that there will be an uptick in the daily rate. We are open to hearing what some of your thoughts are, brainstorming a little bit around what that daily rate looks like. And a couple of you in this room have participated in the task force. And so I'm going to call you out, Roger. You're one of our task force members. We also have recruitment and retention work group. So Amber's sitting on that. And lots of feedback from the group along the way about how can I best accommodate the reimbursement to providers, what changes can happen, what forms can be implemented, how can I track this better? And I know we've got some in the room, Sean, I think you're one that has a really good way of tracking costs. So if you get 3-4 new placements into your home, how do you keep track of the purchases you made for clothing here and the YMCA, you know, registration there, and just trying to find a mechanism to do that. And so I'm not going to steal the thunder of the way it works best, but what I can tell you is we try to make it as simple as possible, and it has to go through your case managers so that they can get it to us. And I say us because I used to oversee that unit, and now we just work hand in hand like sister units. They have a 2-day turnaround. So as soon as we get that in our office, within 2 days it's authorized. And then the state of North Dakota, we have a check write every week. So sometimes you might turn in something on a Thursday and you're like, why did I not get paid for a week? Well, every Wednesday night, we send the authorizations to Bank of North Dakota. Bank of North Dakota then sends them to your direct deposits in the event you have something. So the timeliness is as good as the check write availability, which is weekly. So if you are wanting reimbursement for something, I would encourage you to get it to your case manager by Monday, because our unit will get it authorized as quickly as we receive it. So sometimes the hang up is not necessarily the unit, it's getting from the zone to us, okay? There was a specific question about the 903, which is a new reimbursement form. I know that the licensing specialists have forwarded that. It is part of policy, it's on the state form's website, and really what it is an opportunity for the providers to keep track of the costs that you have for each child. So you have 3 in your home, you'll have 3 separate forms, and that's how we track the dollars for each child in our payment system. And at the end of the day, it all gets bundled and you get one deposit. You see it all in one lump. But when you get your remittance advice, it's broke out, so you know what is being reimbursed to you. It could be your regular payment 10, so you've done the basketball fee. It could be clothing allowance. It could be daycare. So you're seeing all of that broke out by category. And we have an awesome reimbursement training. It's on the CFSTC website. If you need us to send you that again, we can. Is there a group email that goes out after this? Or like, does the association?
We have a private Facebook group.
Okay.
Where we post that.
So the reimbursements there, I think, is another option. And I would say our biggest struggle, and probably all of yours, is childcare. Childcare reimbursement, it feels like it takes longer. We know that. We are working on how we could reimburse providers more directly. That will not happen with our DOS system. We literally have a computer system that is like from the 80s. And we are working on getting a new system. So in the years to come, we are hoping that we'll have an online portal. You submit directly. We have a lot of good ideas, but it's not happening overnight. So we appreciate your patience. And if you have ideas or questions outside of that, I stand ready. Any specific reimbursement questions other than the 903? Use it. Yep.
So the daily rate, what is that considered to cover?
Great question. Okay. So what does the daily rate cover? So the daily rate covers your utility bill, and you're turning your lights on and your garbage and offering food into the home. It covers a small portion of clothing every month. So if you have a child in your home and you need to purchase underwear and socks and maybe a couple t-shirts, it'll cover that. It'll also cover, we said food, if you have to get bedding, just the basics. And then sometimes your insurance company is going to want you to have an extra rider on your insurance. Not always, most of them are pretty good about not doing that, but it would help with covering some insurance costs. So North Dakota is in the top 3 percentile in the nation for reimbursing foster care providers. So we are way at the top for what we reimburse, and I know sometimes it doesn't feel like it's enough with some of the cases that we work with, but please work with case management, and we can consider EMPs if the needs and services for that child outlay the daily rate for those kids. Great question. Yes.
How about if damage is done to your home?
Those damages happen. I think the hardest one for me to see was when the kids took the rocks from the gravel and they drew beautiful pictures on the side of the minivan. It was like so pretty, but it was very expensive. So when that happens, we have insurance for you, and you can talk to your case manager. They will fill out a form alongside of you to have it submitted to me. I review all of the property damage claims in North Dakota. It's a $100 deductible. So if it costs $1,000 and your insurance isn't going to cover it, we'll give you $900 back. So your daily rate maintenance will cover the other $100.
And Kelsey, they have to submit it to their car, home, whatever insurance first,
Or get a denial.
And get a denial from them, and then send it. So it doesn't go, you don't do the form with us first. You do your insurance first, and then we do the form.
What if it's like the kitchen sink that he just broke off because he was angry?
If it's less than your deductible, we just need proof of your deductible. So if they broke your deductible for your house is $1,000,
okay,
and the damage that happened was $275.
Yes.
You talk to your case manager, they can help you fill it out, and you'll get $175. Okay. But we just need proof of your deductible. Okay. Oftentimes, to Peggy's point, all you need to do is email your insurance company and say, I had this incident happen. Should I claim it? And they'll say, not covered. And I just need that email. Okay. Roger.
Kelsey, address when foster parents can provide daycare for another foster parent.
I'll start it. I'm going to hand it over to the zones because this is how they would want it managed locally. So the really cool thing, the provider task force actually said, CFS, what can we do differently because there's not enough daycare? Or I have a 13-year-old boy in my home who needs supervision after school, and nobody's helping me with reimbursement for daycare, and no daycare will take him. Or what do I do in the summer when this child needs extra supervision? Or I work nights. So we said, well, I can't pay or reimburse anyone without a license. So early childcare, they have a license, they're approved, they're certified, they have that. HHS gives that approval, we'll allow it. So we said, federal government, what about our licensed providers, our foster parents? Can they also do this? They hold a license. Sure. So we opened up the floodgates a little bit, and it's actually been a huge support to each other, especially in small rural communities where they don't have daycare. So how would they go about accessing a daycare situation, coverage for childcare from one provider to another?
Thornton County's not doing a lot of them. That's what we just decided. Burleigh County is doing a ton right now because we have a lot of those situations. And honestly, most of you probably remember during COVID, you were allowed to use other foster parents as daycare. And so then when that ended, we were like, but it worked so well. Can we please? So we were so happy when that became an option again. So from our side, all you have to do is contact your case manager and say, hey, I need help with childcare, and this is why. So same things, you have to be working, you have to be in school, you have to be in court, all the things that you normally get childcare covered for. And if you have your next door neighbor that's also a licensed foster parent and they're willing to watch your kids while you are at work at night, you can do that. So we have to say yes, we have to put in our forms. And then the 920 form that you use for your regular daycares now, that form is just filled out by the other foster parent. So both sets of foster parents, so the one that has the kids and the ones that's watching the kids, the signatures instead of the daycare doing the signatures. You mark the days, you mark times. It's a standard flat rate, $5 per kid per hour. No, I almost said per day. It's not per day. $5 per kid per hour. So there, you don't have to negotiate rates or anything like that. And then you just send that form to us instead of at the top it says your, what is it called, daycare something ID, license ID something. You put your own license ID in there if you're providing the care. That's it. You fill out the 920, you send it to us. If it's a one-time thing, it's a one-time thing. If it's every week, you have some hours here and there, you can send it every week. If you agree on doing it monthly, you do it monthly, but you pay that other foster parent just like you would pay daycare, and then we reimburse you for whatever you pay. Does that make sense?
How many of you used it? How many?
Nobody in this room. Yeah, I was gonna say. Opens.
We used it, but we haven't gotten paid. We did.
Not yet.
We didn't know that.
Yes. I just found out about theirs. Huh? No, we approved it. They just haven't, the forms aren't done yet. But I found out about yours today, so. So the other thing with that is you have to not use it as alternative care, right? So there's a difference between needing daycare and us paying for it for daycare and needing alternative care, substitute care, whatever we're calling it now. You guys know what I meant. Not respite either. Respite's totally separate. That's their thing. But you have to be working school with those same requirements that you have for other daycare.
Maybe talk about respite for a second.
Wait, hold on, one last thing. Can you mention how much they get?
$5 per child per hour.
Okay, so I will talk about respite and substitute care. Always been substitute care. So when we became,
Really?
yes.
Never heard of
How
that.
many
Yes.
word?
Ever.
So
Never heard of that.
So
Statement, also known as alternative care. But
Yeah.
substitute.
substitute care in our policy.
Okay.
So to be frank, when we became a unit, there were 6 different people approving respite throughout the state. What we noticed is that respite was, hey, I'm going on vacation for the weekend, I'm going to WeFest. That is not respite, that is substitute care. If you're going on vacation, you're going to a wedding, you're gonna paint the house, you're cattle ranching and you just are not available to take care of the kids, that is substitute care. That is something that is pre-approved by just the custodial agency. We need a weekend to go to Fargo without the kids, substitute care. You're gonna work with Peggy, Tracy, your case manager, and say, my parents are gonna watch the children for the weekend. I will be back on Sunday, and Peggy's gonna say, we're gonna approve this. We know the parents, you guys have been in the home for 2 years, totally normal and is pre-approved outside of respite. So what we approve respite for is those children who have high behavioral health needs. You have a kid in your house who pulled your sink off and you're like, whoa, to maintain this placement, I need respite every other weekend. I need it 3 times a month, whatever that is. The child has high behavioral health needs, has medical needs, emotional needs, social needs, whatever they are that are taxing for you as a provider. You're gonna work with your case manager and say, Tracy's been a lot this week. She's broken my sink and she's torn stuff off the wall. I need the weekend and maybe I need it twice a month. The case manager is gonna send that to us and we make payments every Friday. So that is one thing we heard from providers is when we get respite, we're not getting paid for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. When we get those requests, we make payments every Friday to that provider. So they are done streamlined. And so as Kelsey said, we have a DOS system that's, we call it a dinosaur. But if you guys do respite, the payments are outside of our system and actually in a different system. So it's like, if you're being asked, can you just fill out this W-9? It's because payments are separate from the payments you get for you as a foster care provider for the child you have in your home. And so I think it's really important that you guys associate respite likely with the foster children you have in your home. But what we're really trying to do too is say, think of the families who we're working with through CPS or in-home, who are trying to maintain that stability with their parents, with their relative, whoever that may be. And so in some cases, we're really trying to say, but could you maintain the stability of the child in their home and put them in respite for a weekend with a foster care provider? And so not all these children that you could be seeing are in foster care. Some could be an in-home case. Some could be a CPS case. And it's really trying to use that as a front-end prevention tool instead of always using it as that deep end. If we can save this child and the family in the home, can we give the mom or dad respite every other weekend? And we're going to say yes, and we would pay you as the provider the same rate we do today for children in foster care.
Okay, so you have to have somebody who's willing to do the respite for you. That's sometimes hard. And when you fill out that W-9, you only have to do it one time. Once you're in their system, you're in the system and you don't have to do that again. But we have to have a respite provider identified before we can get approval for respite, right?
So you don't have to have it identified, but we need to know who it is so we pay them. So it's like.
True.
So if you guys are state homes, you're on the provider list, right? So your licensing specialist is saying, are you willing to do respite care? And if you guys say yes, you're listed as a yes on the provider list. So it's like they could filter through Burley and Three Rivers and say, there's 71 respite providers. I've already called 3. Is there anyone else that I could be calling? If you're marked as a yes, that's what you could be getting calls for too, is to provide that respite care to children in CPS, in-home, or in foster care. Yeah, and so respite too, when we became a unit, policy is always 4 calendar days. That's the maximum per episode. So if it needs to be 4 calendar days per week to really maintain that child, that is something we will do. It's important to know that we don't count by overnights. I don't know where this misnomer came in. It's always by calendar day. So it's like if a child goes into respite on 3:30 on Friday, that is day 1. Saturday's day 2, Sunday's day 3, Monday's day 4. So you guys are paid as the respite care provider and the provider by those calendar days. And so it's only that 4 days per calendar week per episode, but up to 4 days a week.
Sometimes, to Peggy's point, there are families who offer respite to each other. It becomes kind of a natural way of supporting one another. There are some providers, probably in this association, who only want to do respite. So call me if you need me. I'll do respite for you, but I'm not taking long-term placements. Now, we do ask case managers that if you need respite and you don't have a provider, case managers are responsible to help locate a provider. So not to leave you hanging like, oh, I'm so excited that you want to use respite. Not okay. That is not okay. And we need to support providers in getting that because we're trying to maintain a placement in your home. And even more importantly, when those kids go home, case managers who have in-home cases open on the back end or trial home visits on the back end, they know you. So mom is like needing 2 days. She just needs the weekend. So they'll call and say, any chance you could do respite for the weekend? Brittany's crew will reimburse for that. So it's a good front end and back end solution to support families and to also give you a break when you are needing it. Any questions?
I have a question. So what's the difference between respite care and substitute care? So for substitute care, like is there a separate list for that, or we are pretty much on our own for like vacations and minor things that don't count as respite care?
So you as a provider, so
yeah, could you repeat that question?
So the difference between substitute and respite care, if we have substitute care, are we on our own to find that for vacation? So for instance, if you guys have a child in your home, remember the identified relative piece of that. So how long has that child been in your home? Are they with friends? Do they know your aunt and uncle? Do they know your grandparents? Do they know your parents? Do they have their own biological aunt and uncle? Remember, those can always be approved by the case manager. So if you're going out of town for a week to Florida and the child's not coming, you could say, my parents know this child because of the time they've been here, whatever it is. Can we get this approved for this child to stay with my parents for 7 days? That would be 100% an appropriate solution. If for some reason you don't have an identified relative or they don't have a relative, that would be something you'd work with the case manager on. Can I call another foster care provider? Is there someone located in our same school district so the child doesn't have to move? What are those factors that the case manager should be aware of for those 7 days to maintain that child in that home placement?
The only difference is that if you're going to Mexico, enjoy it. But when you come back, if you have asked another provider to be your substitute care provider, you in turn reimburse them your daily rate. So we're not involved at all. We're going to only pay the primary provider according to what it looks like in our system for where that child's sleeping. Just happens to be they're at someone else's house for 4 or 5 days based on the custodian's approval, and you'll figure out that payment on your own.
We do have a list.
A list of substitute care providers?
Of all the people.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was the other part of my question. So then on the other side, like at this point, I don't know, you know, you're talking about respite care, some of the more challenging kids. Are we equipped to take that right now? No, but I would definitely be going to substitute care for somebody. So that's what I'm wondering too, is there a separate list where you can be on that as a shelf together?
It's not separate, but they put notes in.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, so the provider list would say like yes to shelter, and then the licensing specialist is gonna say, maybe it's a no, but they're willing to take substitute care placement. So that is noted. Every provider would be different.
We'll still call you for every single one. You can say yes to the ones you want, but. Other question?
Is that provider list only accessible to the caseworkers, or do all follow? Just the caseworkers?
Just the case managers through the human service zone, and then our coordinator lane coordinates with the Division of Juvenile Services or the tribal nations when they need placements.
Ultimately, all of your names and phone numbers, technically for state homes, well, anyone who's licensed with the department, it is public record. But we protect your public record, right? We're only allowing the human service zones who are in need of helping to locate placements access to that list. So we as state employees have it in our licensing unit, and the zones have it. We don't even give it to the tribes or to DJS. We help identify, you know, maybe what the best match might be for identifying some of that. And we are in a huge need. I mean, this is a crisis moment for us in North Dakota. We have probably every day a request to take a 13+ kid every single day. Can someone please take a 13+? And we're like, how many kids do the Bulls have? No. Too many. But teenagers is kind of your cup of tea. And some folks have said, I just don't think I can manage teenagers. I don't want teenagers. And then they get a teenager and it's like been the best thing they've ever done. So it's sometimes just opening that opportunity. But I think every single day we are getting contacted for that. Yep. No. So thank you for saying this. How many Nexus Path families are here today?
And I think there's a couple online too.
Okay, a few online. So really, ultimately, at the end of the day, the rules are the same with a little variation, right? Anything you do through Nexus Path, you run it through your Nexus Path case manager. They help to give you the approval, the status, everything else. Your name as a Nexus Path provider is not on our state list. And so we run all referrals. So if the zone, Three Rivers, wants to see if Nexus Path has an opening, they call Nexus Path admissions, and Nexus Path says, hey, we have a family. They just had a baby here, you know. Maybe they would want to help her who's 9 years old. And yeah, anyway. So good question though. But ultimately the rules are the same, the licensing looks a little different, and you work through a private vendor.
Your path worker will always work through us too.
And the path worker will always work through the custodian, yes.
Can you just elaborate more on the process of getting a child into a path home? Because that feels like a bit of a mystery.
Okay, so the question is, how does a child get into a path home? Well, right now, Brittany and I are sitting in the negotiation lane with Nexus Path, primarily because the level of care in our state has been an area in which we've needed to address for a long time. So I'm going to let Brittany talk a little bit about that, and then we'll talk about how they get admissions.
Who likes to always be in first place for what we do? Right? We want to be competitive. Yeah. Oh, it's you. He's shaking his head, right? So just for a little 2-minute history lesson, when I came into this job 4 years ago, if you guys have not heard of the Family First Prevention Services Act, the federal government 4 years ago said children who are placed in residential treatment and linger there without any permanency have the poorest outcomes of any children who are placed in a family setting. And so I think we can all agree on that, right? Children don't have permanency, they're lingering from place to place, their outcomes are not going to be good. So guess what place North Dakota was in the nation for placing children into congregate care and leaving them there?
Number 1.
We were number 3. We were vying for the top spot. We were third in, yeah, we were vying for the top spot of leaving children, placing them inappropriately in residential treatment and leaving them there. Our outcomes for these youth were poor. And so the federal government came in 4 years ago and said states across the nation need to implement what are called today qualified residential treatment programs. They have to have a third-party assessment, and they have to determine that the child actually needs treatment and their needs can't be met in the community. So we implemented that. We were a trailblazer. We were one of the 11 states who went forward initially, and that showed us that we had some gaps. One of those gaps was we had an agreement with TRHSZ that had not been updated since 1994. So it had not been updated in 30 years. And that was a fail on the side of the department, right? And so when we looked at that agreement, we said, we need to have parameters in place for children who actually need treatment foster care. How does a child get into a treatment foster home? So we put some parameters in place. And like Kelsey said, we're in a negotiation stage. We need to understand current symptoms and behaviors that children are displaying to need treatment. And many state providers have those kids in their home today.
Many of you serve these people.
Right? And so you don't have the word treatment in front of your license, but you're a provider. And so that's stuff we talk about with TRHSZ. How do we get a child in there? How long can they stay? And how do they get out? Because we know that children who are in foster care and don't have a permanency plan linger. We have kids who've been in care for 12 years. And I think the question we should ask ourselves is, after that period of time, are we better parents than the parents could have been themselves? What could we have done prior to making it be 12 years to get that permanency plan achieved and that child home or to adoption or guardianship? And so that is some of the needles that we're trying to push with what treatment foster care means, intensive treatment foster care, and who these children are, defining the parameters in which these children are. So it's like, if you have a child who broke a sink off, did they do it once or have they done it 4 times? Like, what does that look like for a child to need a specialized training in a treatment foster home and for that length of time? And what is their permanency plan?
So Brittany and I work very, very closely together. I mean, I've been working with TRHSZ. Many of you are aware that we had placement maximums, just like a QRTP. You cannot place a child in a qualified residential treatment program for greater than 12 months or 18 non-consecutive months. There's a lot of parameters, 6 months if they're under the age of 12. So we don't have a lot of kids under the age of 12 going into QRTPs. So when we were looking at those lengths of stay in your home, many of you are state homes in this room, you don't have a placement maximum. I'm sure some days you wish you did. Like, I think I've reached my maximum. But there's not a placement maximum in your home, but the custodians are held to a maximum. Custodians are told you have 12 months from the date of this court order to get this child to achieve permanency. How many of you in this room have had a child in your home for greater than 12 months? So those of you that are on the phone, most of the room raised their hand. And so we are really trying to utilize all of you as service providers to provide that service for the right amount of time, for the right dosage for that child, and get them to permanency. And sometimes that's to their aunt. Sometimes it's back to mom or dad. And sometimes it's to a courtroom with a TPR and they get adopted. Every case is different. But if we don't start asking the questions and pushing the envelope and challenging the system, we will have kids in care. I pulled data this morning and shared it with state case managers. We have 34% of our kids that have been in care for greater than 3 years, and 6 of them have been in care for 11 and a half years. That is more time in foster care than they have even been in their own families. So, I mean, I think that's a challenge that our system in North Dakota, we're better than that. And all of you are part of the solution. And so we're excited for that. So back to the original question, Nexus Path accepts referrals through case management, and they're working with us to determine which level of their programming the child is best suited for. So right now, one of our parameters was a 9-month maximum. We are leaning towards a 12-month in a TFC home effective July. So we're working on that negotiation. We're confident that's going to be fine. So that's why I shared it. Age 5 and under is not a TFC level of care. Children who are 3 and 4 are not treatment foster care qualified eligible candidates right now. Many of those 3 and 4-year-olds are in your home. So we are really trying to open up the parameters of the TFC treatment beds for children who are age 6 and greater, because we do see the school age children who are expressing some pretty emotional behavioral symptoms and characteristics that require more service.
Anything from 3 Rivers on TFC
I think the only thing I would add is I would challenge you guys, when you think about those kids who've been in care for 11 and a half years, ask yourself, who created the behaviors you're having today? Have they been moved to 27 different homes and 3 different treatment placements? Could you be the person to say, I'm going to put up with it and we're going to deal with it, and here's what I need to do it? So it's like, really challenge yourself to say, can you be the change agent to say, we can do this, but we need help to do it, and we're going to do it, but we need an EMP, we need respite, we need this. And I hear Kelsey has property damage money just in case something would happen. So it's like, really think, when you guys get the calls, some of these youth look bad on paper, but we have to understand where they came from and what they've been through to get where they're at today, and how can we help them likely transition to independence, because many of these kids, they've been in care for 11 and a half years or teenagers.
I do. So it's kind of a specific yet really general question at the same time, so kind of bear with it. So we had a placement who just went to QRTP homeowner, and we don't know if it's going to be 30 or 90 days at this point. I read a lot of the handbooks and everything, and part of what I read was that if they're not in the QRTP setting for more than 30 days, that is as if the placement never ended. Is that?
So I can speak to that. So 30 days is an emergency placement.
Yes.
And so what that means is the federal government requires a third-party assessment to be done within 30 days. So that assessment is going to say Tracy needs QRTP and she's approved for 90 days, or she's denied and needs to discharge within 30 days.
Okay. So the reason I'm asking, and again, this is not, I'm not complaining about the situation. I understand what's going on, but we got our reimbursement for the full month, but then 3 days later, we got a letter demanding some of them back. So when I read that part about the first 30 days still continuing the placement, I'm concerned that, does that mean that this person will have to be replaced at the end if they stay for 90 days? But like, are we not guaranteed their replacement back like we expect? Or because if the money is being demanded back within the first 30 days, like it says there, is that a sign of what's going to happen afterwards?
So are you talking about your payment reimbursement that you were paid? Okay, so what that means is likely the case manager didn't close the case on our data management system.
Okay.
So you got an overpayment and do have to pay that money.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah,
but I'm just saying, I'm worried about the placement side of it.
No, that's up to you guys. If you want to take the individual back after they have been successfully discharged, that's completely up to you guys.
Okay, but I think what's important for everyone in the room to know is what we're trying to do. So for you guys, you just have that placement, go to a QRTP. Would you be willing to take that child back? You don't have to ask.
Yes.
Okay, yes, you are. So great.
Yes, we are. Yes, we would.
Okay, so what we could do, and so what Kelsey's been really instrumental in, is saying, okay, you guys as providers, Tracy's at the QRTP. She's there for 30 or 90 days. We don't know yet. But we know that she's going to come back to your house, whether you're a state home or a Nexus Path home. Are you guys willing to engage in her treatment? Are you willing to engage in therapy, on-site visits, and having her home? You're shaking your head, yes. Okay, so for those 30 or 90 days, we're gonna say, you guys are gonna get, let's just say the daily rate's $30 a day. We're gonna give you 20 because you guys are gonna go visit her at home on the range. You're gonna have her home. You're gonna engage in family therapy. You're gonna engage in that therapy with her so that makes transition for these kids better, right? They know where they're going.
Yeah, we do all that.
But like I said, I'm not worried about the financial side of it so much, so.
We just want to put them back.
So much so, is the placement gonna be as up to us as we thought it would? So.
I think it's 100% up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
100%.
Yeah.
But if you want the kid back, I don't think any worker is gonna be like, no.
But I think that's
important. That 16-year-old.
Yeah, this helps me, 17, so.
Yeah, same.
But I think that's important that everyone in this room knows that's an option. So if you're called because your child that you had in your home or that you could potentially have in your home is in a treatment place, QRTP, PRTF, whatever that is, ask the case manager, is there any way that we can work on whatever the daily rate is, and we're going to give you expectations. We expect the child to be home twice a month on the weekends, family therapy, whatever you guys are doing, because you're still providing a service to that child and you're helping that child transition from residential treatment back into the community. And that is a viable option that we need to have providers engage in.
Okay, I'm sorry, so currently we go every weekend for a visit, but there's a lot of ifs right now, because we don't know if it's 30 or 90 yet, but if he gets the 90, then he can come home for a week, and have a home visit for a week. So how does that work?
They should add you as a secondary placement in our data management system, and you guys would get paid that way. But if you guys are still engaging with the child while they're in treatment, that is something that you should be talking about if you're Nexus Path from the state, the custodial agency, to say, we are aware that this is an option because we could be paying you even through the days that you're not seeing them, but you're talking to them on the phone, you're in family therapy, because that's just as important as the child being in your home.
Yeah, we do all those things.
The case manager might, the best case scenario would be that you've spoke to them at a child family team meeting, you're part of the debriefs, whatever it might be, and they would then put you in as a secondary placement for up to 14 days every month. So we could pay a daily rate up to 14 days every month so that you stay involved with that child, you're doing the visits. But let me be clear, we've had huge workforce turnover. There are not a lot of case managers who have that knowledge. So to be able to say and not challenge them, you know, not to challenge the case managers, but to just question, can we explore this? I heard this could be an option. And if they say no, there's a lot of people that you can contact, and not to tattle. I really want to emphasize that. Go to supervision and say, can you call Kelsey Bless? Because those are the way that some of these are getting through, is because not a lot of people know that they can be a transition plan. That's an excellent example.
Financially, it's, for us personally, I can't speak for anyone else, it's not that big a deal. We're just worried because we built this relationship with this one, and we want to continue it at least until he's 18. He has a choice to make on his own, you know, so.
And I'm sure everyone in this room has received an overpayment letter from the unit. What that overpayment letter is just to kind of mention that. Usually towards the end of the month, if a child moves, case managers just might not get in there fast enough, and we've already made our payment. And sometimes it's orders, but the unit has already made those payments at the end of the month. So then when they find out on the 3rd, 4th, 8th of the following month that the child actually left on the 29th, we just technically, legally can't pay you for days of service. The child wasn't placed there. So once we get it all figured out, we have to kind of wash the system. And if you have a child in placement, we'll just auto recoup it. But if you don't have a child in placement, then you'll get if you were my daughter's 3rd grade classroom, it would be a naughty note. But it's not because you did anything wrong. It's just the system isn't fast enough to,
It's the adult version of the library.
Yeah. Great question.
More Peggy, can you make it known for like what court order is and how payment and all that will work for them?
Yeah, good question. So on that, like I will be taking that back to our team, because all of our workers that are in the room did not know that was an option, you guys. So I'm glad you brought it up,
because now we know, and that could really help us with discharge planning to know that we have that option. So on our side, if there are payment issues, it's, oh, thanks, Bob. If there's payment issues, there's usually two reasons. One, your worker did not get your case plan entered into frame quickly enough, and eligibility can't make a payment if we don't have a current case plan. Two, we don't have your court order yet. It's usually the court order right now because juvenile court in Burleigh County, especially, I don't know about yours, but well, we're the same. We're the same, never mind. Our court system is really behind on stuff sometimes. So if there's a payment that doesn't get to you, don't assume that your worker knows that you didn't get paid, first of all. Please say something because we don't always get a notice. Sometimes the eligibility worker will reach out to us and be like, hey, we need a new court order, or hey, you need to approve a case plan, whatever it is. Usually they'll do that the day before payments are due so we can go in and make those fixes last minute so that you do get paid. But if it's a court order, we don't have control over that, unfortunately. We then can reach out to our state's attorney's office and they can make a request on our behalf, like, hey, we're out of the order for this one, because they know that it's a payment issue. And I will say our director, your director, they've been meeting with juvenile court about the timeliness of court orders, and it is getting better. But we went through a period of time where we were waiting 3-4 months to get a permanency order, and that left a huge gap in payments. And it sucks for us just as much as it sucks for you guys, I'll say that, because we don't want to have a reason for you to not keep these kids, right? And so if it's a court order issue, we will tell you it's a court order issue. If it's case plan, we can just go in and fix it. That's a fast fix for us. But the court orders is sometimes that, and it's not something we control. But if you're not getting a payment, make sure we know. Like as soon as you notice, would be good.
I was just going to say, our eligibility unit has been really good too if we don't have something in ahead of time. So they know check ride is coming. So they're really good at letting us know. But still, yeah, if you don't get payment, please let us know right away. I don't know, like our court orders used to always come from the juvenile court office, and that's changed where it comes through our state's attorney's office now. And so that's been another change and adjustment. And I know it kind of has caused some delays in that. So it's coming up. Coming. Yes, it is. Yeah. But we will call. We'll call daily and say, hey, do you have this yet? So we're not afraid to bug them.
Maybe, Shauna, do you want to talk about your tracking mechanism a little bit? Shauna, how do you keep track of all the payoffs? So I don't know if it's either. Yes. Look at this.
Apparently, I'm just organized enough to make it up to the panel today.
You're gonna have to work. Shauna, you should introduce yourself because we realized that no workers in our office know who you are.
Oh, good.
Because me, Chantel, and Shayla, that's it. Because you've had my kids on the home.
Because my kids stay in my house for 3+ years,
yep.
All the time. I'm Shauna Piatz. I'm a foster parent. I've been a foster parent for, I think we're going on 6 years. So, you know. And they're full. Always. So I stripped all of my personal information down, but basically I just do, like I have a spreadsheet and I'm told this will get sent out to everybody after this meeting. But I really just do it like a checkbook balancing. But on the column A, I list my children, and then column B is the type of payments, so your standard monthly care payment, an EMP, daycare, clothing, whatever it is that you're getting reimbursed for. I keep track of the month and year. And then the amount, and in the amount, you know, I'll do calculations and whatnot. But in my notes, it's whatever I need to be relevant. So like the amounts I have in that top line are in the formula in column E. But otherwise, I mean, it's stuff like, hey, we visited a parent out of the town, so I'm getting reimbursed mileage or whatever it is to help you remember. And as I get them, this is where I enter the amount of the check and the check date, and then checking the lines that get that it applies to. But I mean, it's not that hard. It's just see a checkbook, but you're free to use it. And it, you know, I don't keep it up every month, but all of a sudden Peggy will get 5 emails with, here's what I'm missing. So can you check on these? Yeah. So I don't know. That's what I do.
Yeah. Do you keep receipts separate for each kid? Yes, she does.
So I sure do. So, yeah. Do I keep receipts separate? So for each kid that I have binders up in closets. So I have like a binder for my remittance advices that I get from the county or the state. But I have one binder that has all those, and I have one binder that has licensing, and I keep almost everything that comes through the door paperwork wise for foster care, because I never know when I'm gonna have to refer back or what I'm gonna need. So as far as receipts, a lot of it winds up being credit card statements or whatever. So it can be electronic in files and folders on my computer, but otherwise, yeah, like I've got a binder for each kid with tabs, and I use those clear sheets and just stick a ton of papers in there until they're full, and then add another one and keep filling it up. So, you know, after 3 years, you have quite the stack. But yeah, it's just keeping everything that comes in the door. And I literally, like for my kids, I don't do a lot of like, here's receipts for them, here's medical for them, unless I have a high needs medical kid. So for a while I was separating all his medical stuff out by medical provider because it was helpful. But typically I'm just kind of adding it to the pile so I know about the date range and I can kind of do far enough back to figure out where it's at. So I don't know. Any other questions?
Yep.
So the reason I asked Shauna to make mention of the separating of the receipts, so when you go to Walmart and you're getting your groceries, but you also needed to buy pajamas and you got extra approval for diapers and you did something else that you needed for your 9-month-old in your home. Please put everything for that 9-month-old on its own receipt, send it through, and have it separate from all the food you bought for your house. That is probably the largest headache for our eligibility unit, is not knowing what is on these receipts and then being told, well, this is crossed off and this is maybe circled and then the number gets covered. It's just a nightmare. So independent receipts is a huge, huge, huge help. It'll expedite your reimbursement because there will be limited questions.
And then okay, so the 903 is going to be helpful for that too, because you have to list it out. Previously, we had to interpret what things meant. Alyssa, we had some things. They're new and they had no clue what they were doing, and it's fine. But let's say they bought a pair of pants, but it said like 2X man, some black, right? And they send that in, and I send it in, and eligibility is like, well, what the heck is this for a 13-year-old girl, right? And so we had to justify that as workers, whereas if you guys are keeping your receipts and you're doing the 903, you're filling that in like it's a pair of black sweatpants because that's all this kid will wear. And she's man size. So, right? So if you were writing that down and keeping your receipts separate, it's much faster. We don't get those returns from eligibility like, what is this? Why are you buying that? So it's helpful.
No, I'm just gonna add. I do this too. I have a column that includes. I have a column that includes, did I send it? Like, have I submitted it? Because that's the worst part for me, is like, have I submitted this? I also have a spreadsheet where I keep the rates and I plug in alternative substitute care, like how many days, how many kids, whatever, so I know what payment I'm supposed to give them. And then I have another spreadsheet where I track if they get the $400 clothing allowance, what I'm purchasing and where I'm at on that, so I'm kind of know when I'm getting close or whatever, and when the deadline is.
And then I keep everything in Google Drive, so I have it handy at my fingertips whenever I need it.
And then Amber texts her like every other week and says, what are the rates
What's the
today?
rate? Thanks, Leslie. Yeah. And then I just snap pictures of my stuff instead of saving it, save it in my Google Drive.
So I have a question for you all. As we're planning, legislative session says up to 3%. And so one thing that I like even stuff, I'm very like OCD, like very much like this has got to make sense and I want it quick and efficient. So when you get $27.14, that's like really hard to calculate. Yeah. So we are working with fiscal. So I would like an opinion from all of you. We're working with fiscal on having the ability to round our numbers so that we would have a $35 a day rate. We'd have a $32 a day rate instead of $31.89. Or if it's $31.07, sorry, but it'd be 31. You know, so we'll have to find our balance. But in your work and sharing and helping each other and substitute care reimbursements, would a round number be something you want?
Yes.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
unanimous.
It's unanimous. So that's something we're working on. And then the other thing that I have a question on, because we're looking at leveraging where our costs are. 0 to 5-year-olds is different than the, actually it's 5 to 12 and then 13 plus. So our 5 to 12 range and our 0 through 4 range, they're different today. Right. Do you feel as providers that cost in a state home, sorry, Nexus Path is different for you, but in a state home, do you feel like at the end of the day, the cost for an itty bitty baby is less than that of a 5 to 12-year-old?
I don't know.
Yeah. I was waiting for it. So right now we pay less for the itty bitties.
But they have that infant allowance.
Then there is WIC, and we have a little bit of infant allowance.
What are we talking about? It's like
For irregular payments.
I think that's quick formula and it's just
Ridiculous.
But it also then takes my time to make appointments, go to the appointments, given to the county care goes. So it's added.
It's extra stress for the provider to get access to WIC, but WIC is an option. The reason I bring it up is right now we have 3 rates. And I think just strongly, and by the way that I've seen history, we need to pay the 13 plus rate higher.
Yes.
Because if you are taking in a teenager, it's an incentive, first of all, to take a teenager to pay more. But for the 0 through 12-year-olds, I don't really see that rate as needing to be different. So we could potentially, might not happen in the next month, but we could potentially, we're brainstorming and analyzing the cost, go to 2 rates, a 0 through 12-year-old rate and a 13 plus rate. Thoughts? Doesn't matter, do you care?
I think any way to simplify it.
Is 12 like a magic number for you?
Well, the 13-year-olds is just, you hear 13 and they don't know what he wants.
I just wonder because it seems that once they hit middle school,
Yeah.
that's where the cost really shoots up, and that's not at 13.
Okay, so that's good feedback.
So
That's what I was just even like 11 and up.
Yeah.
Not even so much the cost, but just sometimes you start looking at those
The
11,
running-
12-year-olds.
and their clothes are expensive.
Yeah, and you're looking at, sometimes they start to act out more than even like, I think I would take a 17-year-old over a 12-year-old.
Okay.
I have a 12-year-old right now. My own kid.
No, that's good feedback. So, I mean, we're looking, and as we write policy, we're looking at ways to streamline it, be efficient, make it as simple as possible, rounded numbers, not so many, sections and how much money you do for reimbursement. We want to make it simpler. So we're looking for ideas. You'll have my email. You can shoot me an idea if you want. Roger's on the task force, so you can rub elbows with Roger, have him bring it to the task force. And I don't know if everyone in this room knows it, but I gotta just compliment Roger. He went in front of legislation and saved you all. One of the legislative session moments was a bill that was going to require additional training for foster care providers who would be required to take fetal alcohol syndrome training. Not a bad idea. That wasn't the intent, but it was going to be placed in law. And Roger went before the legislature and said, you know what, when we need that specific training for the children placed in our home, we'll get the training. You don't have to put it in the law. And they listened. They listened, and I took pictures on my screen and sent it to them. I was so proud of them. So it was great. Anything else? Any last questions? Roger.
There's different levels of additional reimbursement that can be given by the state. What are those different levels, and what requirements is it that the child has to meet, or deficits, or whatever the child has to meet to get those levels?
So the excess maintenance payment is what Roger is asking about. What does an excess maintenance payment mean, and how do you get access to it, and what does the child's needs have to be? And the big questionable answer is it depends. So we have a pretty old form. We are going to be looking at that form because that form that determines the excess maintenance payment is what is used today in adoption subsidy. How many in this room have also adopted a child from North Dakota foster care? So you're familiar with the adoption subsidy. With that, the EMP has 4 levels. The first level is a pretty small value. I don't have the value in front of me. $50 a month. So a little bit of need helps offset the cost of this little one has a tummy allergy, and so we have to buy different food, and it costs more money, and it would be helpful to have an offset of that. So it's possible that there would be a level 1. Level 2, I'll ask Tracy and Peggy, do you know a level 2 that you've approved? But what have you approved for a level 2? What are their needs?
Sean did one of yours gets swapped out to level 2. Yeah.
You might have 2 extra appointments a week. You do a little extra running. They're offsetting some of that transportation cost by adding an excess maintenance payment. There's no excessive major behaviors. A level 3, you might have explosive behaviors, multiple times tantruming, constant bedwetting. You're doing extra laundering in your house, medically fragile where you have multiple appointments. That would possibly escalate you to a level 4.
Yes, right now those are being bumped down to
level 2s, so some of those, okay? Then they go through your case manager, they advocate for you, they talk through what those dollar values are, and we'll work on ranges because I think it's subjective. I think that the way that the form is today isn't always telling the story. And so that's where case management can really help. Our field service specialists do approve that. They're CFS, basically a third party to your case, looking at it going, do you though? You know, questioning what some of that might be. And they're not doing it to be facetious. They're really trying to challenge what are the needs in that home, and maybe you need more. Like, gosh, I'm looking at this and actually I think you're shortchanging what the needs are in that home, and that can happen at times too. But level 4s come to Dean Stern, who is the permanency administrator. He also known as Mr. Foster Care. He's been around a long time, and he'll approve those level 4s, and then those get reimbursed the same way that you get your maintenance payment.
So I don't know if it's the same for you, but we have had the last 6-ish months, 8 months, I'm looking at Shauna because she's been on this with me, 6-8 months, we have had all of our EMPs scrutinized and the rates dropped. And we've had to really look at how we are scoring and be able to very clearly justify what is going on with kids right now. Shauna and I had a call with the state regarding specific kids, so I'm not going to bring that in, but if you would need an EMP, talk to your worker, submit it, I would say at the beginning of the month if possible, because it takes a while to get it back. But we did have the opportunity then to revisit it with our field service specialist and be able to say, you know, what we're saying in team meetings is not necessarily what is going on in the foster home. Because during team meetings, we have the bio parents there. We don't want to focus on the negativity
of the kids' behaviors when we have the bio parents there, we're really trying to lift them up, right? So we, in our team meetings, we're talking about like, you know, how the parents are doing and how the kids are doing, but we're not talking about the day-to-day struggles of the foster parents, because we don't need bio parents questioning what the foster parents are doing, right? We want them to know that their kids are safe and cared for in these homes. So we've been having several conversations about that. So if your EMP is denied or the rate is dropped down, know that you can go back to your worker and request a reevaluation, I guess we would call it, just to bring that field service person in to kind of a more intimate conversation about what is really going on and what your needs are.
I haven't had any for a while. I don't know if you guys.
EMPs?
No, I haven't.
No. Our field service specialist works real closely with us too and tries to help advocate for those kids that have those needs. So I'm not trying to. I think we have two different ones, right? Yeah. So I think it's a lot of conversation though on what's really happening and what you are all doing for the kids that are in your care to meet their needs.
I bring it up because I think it's good for the foster parents to know that it exists. I mean, the majority of the time, you just get your regular monthly payment and that's fine. But when you're having to transport the children to 1, 2, or 3 different therapy sessions each week, it may not be because the child misbehavior and stuff. It's just a lot of road time and gas money, and so there is additional expenses to the family. And I think we should be able to, that should be recognized. There's other kids that are just downright fussy and crabby, but there's really no additional cost to us. But it's certainly, if it can be paid for putting up with it, that would be nice. But there is a difference between a real cost to us and an emotional cost, like financial versus emotional.
And I think that's why it's important to bring those field service specialists in, because you guys think about the families in McLean County, Mercer County. It's like they're driving probably sometimes 2 to 3 days a week, an hour each way back and forth to get that child. So it's like when that happens, or if you have a child with significant behaviors, that you're bringing that in and saying, if I'm taking this child as a provider, here's what I'm going to need: respite, potentially an EMP if I'm driving, or based on behaviors, and how can we make this work together and not so we're on the same team, right? We all have the same goal in mind. So how can we do that cohesively as a team?
And you're right, Roger, because I've had conversations with several foster parents about EMPs over the last couple of months, and every time I have brought up, like, would it be helpful to have an EMP, they look at me like, what? I'm like, you've been doing foster care for 8 years, 12 years, and you've never had a kid who needed an EMP? Okay, but we do need to be offering that, and for you guys to know that that's an option is really important. I'm glad you brought that up.
What other questions?
Other questions?
So I heard you talk about the 12-month order going down to a 9-month order. Is that going to be the actual court orders? Because there's other states that do like quarterly orders. What are we doing here?
So 2 different things, but the federal government says that you can give up to a 12-month order. Some of our courts are doing 6-month orders. They're saying you're going to come in every 6 months and we're going to review that order. But most of the time in North Dakota, because the law allows for an order to be given up to 12 months, 99% of the time the custodial agents request 12 months. Now that doesn't mean that they can't go to court before the 12 months is up and say, things are better, we can send the child home, we can vacate this order. The 9 and the 12 months that I was talking about was placement maximums for the treatment foster program.
Well, we can't flip that, say nothing's going right. Why don't we go back to court 6 months?
Yeah, and a custodian can. Yeah, a custodian can. At any time, and a parent, and we don't see it a lot. agree with you. We do not see it enough. But a parent also doesn't realize the rights they have in being able to go into a courtroom and say, I want this case to be reviewed, and I know that they've only had custody of my son for 4 months, but here's why I want this reviewed. They can do that at any time. Most of the time, our parents don't know that they can. And so custodians too, but good point.
My big problem is you get the 12 hours, we're at 12 months, and then all of a sudden they decide to start being parents.
Well, we haven't seen our kids for 7 months, but here we are.
So if we have 3-month orders, 6-month orders.
Shorter.
We talk about 34% of these kids being in care for how long? Why don't we get people in front of someone that holds the key sooner?
And holding the, having the courts help hold the custodians, accountable for some of that, and the parents to see that we want to make this movement to get children back home. I mean, nobody wants to keep kids in foster care for their whole life. But I think you bring up a valid point, and sometimes being able to challenge those questions and ask people to challenge themselves to ask those questions is going to help move the needle. Maybe we'll see the change.
Because I mean, is it a legislature?
Nope. You can go to court any day of the week. A custodian could say, we're going to have a review hearing. A parent could request a review hearing, and they don't need to wait for 12 months. In fact, they shouldn't be waiting for 12 months, but they can. And the courts, our court partners impact that a lot too. Peggy said state's attorneys don't always want to go back into court earlier, but we can help influence change. It doesn't happen overnight. That's a very good point. Give them shorter orders and see progress maybe faster.
I think he's going to address an online one that was submitted.
So there's an online question. It's primarily about the TFC time limits. And it's asking if it's morally unethical to create change and additional trauma is what they're saying. That's the time limits that Kelsey talked about. They're reviewing right now, and they're looking at changing that for that reason, because they realized, right, that the 9 months is not the magic number.
So back to the TFC placement maximums, I'm going to go back to us. Yes, we agree.
That's what she said.
Yes. It is not unethical. We are really trying to push the needle. When we say when children need treatment, what does that mean? Treatment doesn't go on for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Treatment is time limited. That child may still have needs that need to be addressed, but are those behaviors and symptoms that they're still having requiring treatment? And so the parameters were put in place to really look at an agreement that was 30 years old, had not been addressed in 30 years, and to align with child welfare and really putting placement maximums on kids being in foster care. What is their permanency plan? When we get placement extensions for TFC, I think out of 82% of them, the plan was adoption. We have 82% of kids at the plan's adoption. Why are they still sitting in a treatment foster care home after 3 years? These are questions we should be asking ourselves and doing better for kids and families instead of asking, why are we still here 3 years later? What's going on? If families are adopting children who are coming from treatment foster care, they're going to not have a case manager there every day of the week, right? They're going to have to learn how to parent children in conjunction with community service providers and not have an on-call provider there every day of the week. And so it is not morally unethical. This is something we have worked in conjunction with Nexus Path for 2 years. And we are currently right now in contract negotiations for the upcoming biennium and what that means. But we also as a state have to say, if you're a treatment foster care provider, here's what a treatment child will look like, not a 5-year-old child who's throwing tantrums. Like, these are 15 and 16-year-old kids coming out of a facility who have a history of placement disruptions that are high priority for children to be placed in the treatment home.
And that's the key. It's different need. Like, treatment foster care is not for every kid. It's for kids that have those extreme needs. And I think that's the thing. We used to just put kids in path homes if we could get one, and they just stay there forever, right? Because those path parents would then adopt them. But we aren't doing that now. We have to have the justification to be able to put kids in that level of care.
And I think the bigger question, and just to kind of spin this positively, is that it's not about TFC or state or regular care. This is about what is ethically appropriate for children and how long do we really believe they need to stay in foster care. So we need to be looking at that permanency. So pushing the envelope, going to court, questioning the timeframes so kids don't linger. It's not fair to them. That's not a life you want for your children. And we don't want to have kids lingering in our system. Amber?
So on that note, how many times do we allow the parents chance after chance after chance? Not only the kids lingering, but like, okay, now, oh yeah, mom got a house, so we're gonna put the kids back there. 2 weeks later, mom's living on the street. Now the kid's back in a different foster home because that bed, you know, is full.
And aftercare services, in-home supports, engaging with families. I think our zones are getting better and better and better at doing that. I'm not going to speak for Tracy and Peggy at what they're doing internally in their agencies, but I think trying to incorporate that aftercare component and not just a child is in foster care, we close their case today and we're done. That is like so long ago thinking. These families need our help more when they get their kids back. When their kids are back in their care, we need to stay with them longer and provide some aftercare supports and services. And it might be your house for respite, but I think that our zones, I compliment the zones for getting better at doing that and recognizing parents make mistakes, we make mistakes, kids make mistakes. And sometimes it does take 4 or 5 times for them to kind of get back on track, but you can't expect them to get better if you're not going to be there along the way to pick them up. So.
And, you know, I would say from our perspective, we try to do everything we can to build those relationships with the families we're working with so that after we drop custody, if they are struggling, they call us before we have to get CPS involved again, because that's the last thing they want, right? Just this week, I've been working with a family that we closed, gosh, almost 3 years ago, but their lease wasn't renewed and they need a place. And so one of our workers volunteered to take the mom to look at an apartment today because it needed to happen. And so we are building those relationships with those families so that we can continue to support them after. In Morton County, they do a lot more in-home and foster care for each worker. We're a little more split in Burley just because volume, I think, is probably the biggest reason. But we have leaned into our in-home workers quite a lot recently because we're understaffed on foster care side. So our in-home workers have really stepped in and helped us get into homes that we really need to keep supporting, even after our custody is done or on a trial home visit or whatever it may be. But at that end point, we have really leaned into our in-home team a lot. We've leaned into our Morton County partners to help take some things off our plates. And like that's part of this change of going to zones and statewide. That's been, I would say, really, really helpful. Is that now we have other people that can be part of our team, not just, you know, it's your problem because you're the case manager, right? So we have a lot of other people. You know, our state's attorneys make a lot of decisions for us on what we can take to the court and what we can't. So we can request a review hearing at any point. Parents can request a review hearing at any point. But we as workers have to be able to justify to not just our state's attorney who has to take it to the court, but to whoever the referee is, why we need them to make the decision we're asking them to make. And so that means on our side, we have to prove that we have done every possible thing we can do to get those kids back with their biological family before we can move forward with adoption, even guardianship. We have to do all that other stuff first. I think you probably all know that, but we also, ICWA factors in a lot for us as far as being able to even just make placements sometimes. So We sometimes have to move kids because of ICWA. We sometimes have to back out of a TPR because of ICWA. We recently found out from one of our ICWA partners that if we do an adoption, kids from that tribe will lose all of their inheritance. And for some of those kids, that's a lot of money. And so now we, as a zone, probably the state, because you're gonna hear the same thing, I'm sure. As a zone, we have to reevaluate how we're handling cases like that we maybe identified adoption and we've already made the ask referral, but hold up, if we do that, then this kid loses $20,000 a month, right? For the rest of their life, MHA. And so is that in that kid's best interest? So we have to relook at things like that too. So even if it's a family member who's adopting and an enrolled member. Yeah. So when the state went away from permanent guardianship, or like, I don't know, what was it called? Was it called permanent? The law changed. And so now our guardianships are not until they're 18, they're for that 1, 3, whatever years. And so when that happened, it changed how we have to do things. And so we started to do more TPRs and adoptions because guardianship means you have to go back to court every 1 to 3 years. And now we have to look back at, okay, so for these kids that are going to be impacted by that ICWA stuff, do we then try to do a guardianship and make sure that the guardian knows that they need to go back to court every 1 to 3 years, and someone from our agency has to maintain communication with them and go back with them. And so I just want to say, like, it's not just your caseworker making decisions. It's never just your caseworker making decisions. We staff our cases with our team internally. We staff it with our field service. Sometimes we call these guys because we need more information, or we're like, you know what, I'm in a pickle and I need help and I don't know that I can figure this out on my own, but you guys have money and and they have and they know, yeah, it's your money, but they also have, they have the policies in their brains in a way that we don't on the ground, right? So they know exactly what things fit and how they can bend some things to make it work. And I will say I have never asked and been told no. They've always, no, now they've always helped figure it out. Like, remember on Veterans Day when we had a blizzard? Everybody remember that? And we were all stuck in our houses. I had a kid run away. And we no longer have a certified shelter in Bismarck. And so to place this child, I was gonna have to take her to Minot. But guess what? The road's closed. Also, I can't get out of my driveway. So I had to call Brittany to, you know, make some decisions about, yeah, we can make an exception. And here's what we're gonna do to make this work. And so we have resources. So if there's anything that you guys need, and you're like, you know what, this might sound really stupid to ask, probably it's a no, ask us anyway, because we can get really creative.
And I think just to go back around, because Amber, you reminded me of what Kelsey showed this morning. We don't always agree with what our parents are doing, right? My parents did not agree with what I was doing at 15, 16, 17, and 18. But it's like when you build that relationship with the child's parents that are in your home, that's when you have the best outcomes. Amber, you had said in the video that we watched today. We adopted this child, but we talk to these parents all the time. I officiated their wedding. It's like, that's what kids want. When we talk to our youth action board, who are youth who aged out of our North Dakota foster care system, it's like, I wish I didn't feel like I had to choose my foster parent or my parent. I wish they could just work together because I want them both in my life. So it's like, that's what it comes back to, where the parents are gonna likely mess up more than 2 or 3 times. And how do we support them through that? Whether it's permanency, sending them back home, you guys are that change agent that parent probably needs in most of that situation. So I ended on a good note.
That sounds like a great spot to end things because it's 8 o'clock already.